Okay, so now that we have a simple server that is serving a string, we want to take this a step farther and we actually want to start serving images. So I'm going to pick one of these images. Let's go with the fern. And I want to actually serve that image when we get into the response part of this. So to do this, I need another library, one that will actually let us talk to the file system, and that is the FS library, short for file system. Now, normally in JavaScript in the browser, you're not allowed to touch the file system. That's actually a very important security feature, that there's no way to talk to the file system. But Node is intended to be run as server-side code, and it does have a very definite need to be able to access the file system. So it does have a file system library. This is based on the POSIX file system style of operation. So for those of you from a Linux or a Mac background, it's going to be very familiar. For those of you in Windows, Windows uses a very different style of accessing files, so it's going to look very different for you guys, but you should be able to follow along. And what we're going to do is we need to read in one of these image files. So I'm going to use read file, and I'm actually going to use read file sync right now because this is most closely parallels what your prior experience in imperative languages has been. So we'll just use this for now. In a bit, we're going to come back and swap out what we're using. So here I'm going to read file sync, and I'm going to pick one of these files. I said we'd do the fern, and we need to give the path relative to the directory that we're executing this current file in. So server.js is inside the gallery, so we need to drop down a directory into the images. And then we're going to call in fern.jpg. And the read file sync will actually open that file, read in its contents, and then return the binary data that is that image file. So we want to go ahead and save that information. And I'm just going to call this var data, and I'm going to set that equal to the contents of that file. And instead of sending an empty string saying OK, I'm now going to send that data down to our client. So response.end data. Let's go ahead and save our changes. And now if we restart our server and reload our page, we should be served our fern image. So there's a couple things going on here. We are, again, sending a response just like we were before. But one of the big differences is now we're sending an image, and that image is coming through. There's one more thing we should really do whenever we're sending an image, and that is set on our response a header explaining what the content type is. And in general, we should always do this on a server to say what kind of data we're sending to our client, whether that be HTML data, whether that be an image, really any kind of type. So here, the image type, and we can see from the file type up here, that's actually JPEG. So we're sending an image / JPEG. And this is also known as a MIME type, and there are a lot of those that are actually registered, as well as you can provide a custom MIME type. So I'd encourage you to learn more about those as you need them. Now we can set a header on the response, so this is part of building that response. That's going to be attached to the header part of our response in the head part here, and then the body will be the image that we're sending. There are a couple caveats. We can only set the headers before we end building our response, because as soon as we finish building that response, it is dispatched to the client. So it is no longer available for us to modify. At that point, we're done. It's also important that we can only send that response once, and that will come into play in a minute. But if we look at what we've done now, if we go back and restart our server and refresh this page, we won't really see any difference because this browser is smart enough to recognize an image file from its binary structure. Not all browsers will be, so some of them will need it actually specified, and it's good practice to go ahead and specify that.